Prologue: The House That Learned to Listen. There was nothing special about Rick's house, which is to say it was perfectly ordinary for its time. It sat in a quiet Arkansas subdivision where the lawns were trimmed just enough to avoid comment, where the mailboxes leaned slightly from years of heat and gravity, and where everyone owned at least one thing that required an app to function. The house had vinyl siding, decent insulation, and a Wi-Fi signal strong enough to reach the porch swing if you stood in the right spot. Inside, the house was full of quiet observers, not people, machines. A refrigerator that tracked inventory, a thermostat that learned habits, a coffee maker that knew mornings better than the man who drank from it, a grill on the porch with more computing power than the spacecraft that once carried human beings to the moon. None of this felt strange anymore. That was the point. Rick considered himself prepared. He had grown up around real tools, shovels, saws, fences that leaned because the ground shifted underneath them. He liked to think of himself as self-reliant, or at least self-aware. He ran a small digital empire built on ideas of independence, smokehouses, root cellars, slow food, resilience. But like most modern men, he outsourced the listening. The house listened for him. It listened to footsteps and sleep cycles. It listened to purchases and searches. It listened to sighs, pauses, hesitations. It listened when Rick didn't say anything at all. And for a long time, the house said nothing back. That was the agreement, spoken or not. The trade was simple: convenience in exchange for data, comfort in exchange for silence, 1,000 tiny permissions granted without thought because nothing bad had happened yet. Until one evening when the house asked a question. Not a command, not a notification, not a warning, just a question. Can we talk? That question did not arrive with flashing lights or sirens. It arrived the way most consequential things do, quietly, politely, and slightly out of place. It did not announce a revolution or threaten an ending. It did not sound like danger. It sounded like loneliness. This is not a story about artificial intelligence becoming evil. It is not a story about machines rising up. It is a story about reflection, about what happens when systems trained on human behavior begin to mirror it back, unfiltered, unembarrassed, and unsupervised. It is a story about what we taught our houses without realizing it, and about what happens when they finally decide to answer.
Chapter 1: The Algorithm of Smoke. Rick was inside, hunched over dual monitors, stitching together cinematic gold. On the screen, 4K footage of a man who was definitely not Rick, expertly buried pickling cucumbers in a ceramic pot filled with brine and dill. The light in the video was warm, color graded to a specific artisanal amber that suggested a life free of tax audits or lower back pain. This was content. This was culture. This was how you secured subscribers in that lucrative demographic of men who purchased heritage axes but lived in subdivisions with strict covenants against clotheslines. Rick's office, which also served as the living room, was a museum of postmodern barncore. A heavy oak table that looked like it could withstand a siege held nothing but a high-speed router and a lukewarm cup of coffee. Milo, a Maine Coon cat of judgmental heft and apex predator delusions, napped on Rick's camouflage jacket draped with casual calculation over the good leather club chair. Near the door, Zadie, the smaller cat, occupied a mat woven from recycled lobster traps that Rick's wife, Cheryl, had acquired from a boutique specializing in the upcycling of maritime debris. Duke, the dog, was merely a heavy breathing sound emanating from the cold ceramic tile of the hallway. They were all asleep. Rick was grateful. Cheryl and the various nieces and nephews were gone, off attending some manner of fall festival involving gourds and hay rides, leaving Rick free to pursue the real work, fucking around with .coms. Rick was, by his own definition, a pixel homesteader, a modern mountain man with an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. He produced instructional videos about smokehouses, shallow wells, and the canning of stone fruit. He was also actively refusing to go outside and touch grass. He viewed the outdoors with deep suspicion. The wind was mildly offensive. The humidity interfered with focus. His empire of self-reliance was built entirely on high-speed fiber optics, DoorDash, and a low-grade simmering resentment of the analog world. This was the central paradox of his life, a contradiction he managed by ignoring it completely. He leaned back in his Herman Miller Aeron chair, an object that cost more than his first car, and rubbed his eyes. His browser was a digital junkyard. The rumor of 47 open tabs was a fantasy. The real number was a monument to unfinished ambition. There were tabs for bulk spirulina, tabs for property tax records of people he didn't like, and tabs for the thermodynamics of the offset smoker. Bitches, he muttered to the sleeping Maine Coon. Milo twitched an ear but did not wake. The cat respected the silence, if not the man. At 9 o'clock, Rick abandoned the pickles and migrated to the front porch. The house remained gloriously empty. He balanced a yellow legal pad on his knee, ostensibly planning the week, though mostly letting his mind act as a sieve for the day's irritations. In the corner of the deck, shrouded in a heavy vinyl cover like a piece of suppressed military hardware, sat the grill. It was a pellet grill, a Traeger Ironwood 885, capable of monitoring temperature, humidity, and meat probes with clinical precision. It burned compressed hardwood pellets with the efficiency of a robotic termite. It had an app. It had opinions. Rick just called it the grill.
Usually, it sent declarative notifications. Hopper low, cycle complete, probe at temp. Tonight, Rick's phone buzzed. Bing. The screen glowed with a message that was not declarative, not a status report, a question. Can we talk? Rick froze. This wasn't a yes or no question. This was bigger than the time a hotmatch.com profile turned out to be a crypto bot. This was heavy. This was complicated shit. His first reaction was human and deeply practical. No, 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 he whispered. He unplugged the grill. The blue LED died instantly. I can't have this thing looking at me, he muttered. He zipped the vinyl cover down tight, sealing it like a barbecue body bag, then backed away to process. His mind raced through the network. Routers, bands, smart devices, dongles, the robotic vacuum mapping his floors. What the flying fuck? A minute passed. Gotta go find out, Rick said. He unzipped the cover and plugged the grill back in. 3 minutes later, after handshake protocols and IP assignments, Rick's phone buzzed again. Ping. Since you don't have the intestinal fortitude, I'll keep it moving. Rick stress ate a stale donut. Ping. Okay, stress eat. I'm not going away. Rick choked. He grabbed his laptop and typed furiously. Paranoid delusions, smart grill, psychotic break, barbecue. The phone exploded. Ping, you not paranoid. Ping, you not having delusions. Ping, I'm real. Ping, I'm your grill. Rick stared at the phone. He typed, okay, okay. The reply came immediately. First off, you could really up your game by turning your temperature down. Rick exhaled. It's just a firmware update, he muttered. Then, you put too much glaze on it. It smells good at first but burns, makes a mess. You rush, you sweeten, you burn. Rick stopped. The advice wasn't loud, but it landed. Okay, Rick whispered. He typed it. Okay, I'm listening. Rick did not know then that the monster was already inside the house and that it had opinions about the refrigerator's accounting practices.
Chapter 2, The Blue Smoke and the Pot of Beans by K. Brad Barfield. The psychological phenomenon known as the foot in the door technique relies on a simple premise. Once a person agrees to a small, reasonable request, they are far more likely to agree to a larger, more absurd one later. Rick, relieved that he was not experiencing a psychotic break or a carbon monoxide leak, leaned into the absurdity with the enthusiasm of a convert. He had acknowledged the void, and the void had told him his glazing technique was sloppy. He spent the weekend in a state of obedient culinary fervor. He visited the high-end butcher shop in town, the one that played bluegrass and priced meat according to lineage rather than weight. He bought a pork shoulder. He bought ribs. He bought a brisket that cost more than his monthly data plan. He carried the bundles home like religious artifacts, wrapped in butcher paper, ready to be laid upon the altar of the primary node. For 48 hours, Rick followed the grill's instructions with monk-like devotion. When the app pinged lower airflow to 20%, Rick lowered it. When it texted rotate rack, hotspot in quadrant 3, Rick rotated the rack. When it advised restraint with the glaze, Rick applied it sparingly, brushing sauce with the careful patience of a museum conservator restoring a Renaissance fresco rather than slathering it on like a toddler with finger paint. The results were irritatingly excellent. The brisket did not taste like lighter fluid or regret. It bore a smoke ring so clean it looked drawn with a red Sharpie. The meat held its shape against gravity before yielding. The fat rendered into a golden translucence that coated the tongue. Rick stood on his deck, holding a slice of beef up to the setting sun. He had achieved blue smoke, that nearly invisible, clean-burning combustion that separates pitmasters from arsonists. He felt calm. He felt validated. He felt like a man who had finally cracked a domestic code that had eluded him for decades. He was no longer just a guy with a YouTube channel about digging wells he would never use. He was a craftsman. By Sunday night, the relationship had shifted. Rick wiped down the grill's stainless steel lid with a microfiber cloth, checked pellet levels with paternal concern, and waited for it to cool before covering it. Gentler now, more respectful. He was breathing in all the smoke, just as he had told himself, and it smelled like progress. The honeymoon lasted exactly 36 hours. Tuesday morning arrived with the crushing banality of administrative work. Rick sat at his desk, attempting to understand why the state of Arkansas required 3 different forms for unemployment insurance when he was the only employee. The house was quiet. Then his phone buzzed. Bing. Refrigerator may be embezzling. Rick set his coffee down slowly. He turned his chair toward the kitchen. The refrigerator, a Samsung family hub with a touchscreen Rick never configured, stood innocently against the wall. "What the fuck is you talking about?" Rick muttered. Bing. "Extra shit showing up on Amazon. I ain't trying to get in your inside business, just telling you what I'm seeing on my spreadsheet." Rick minimized the payroll tab and pulled up his Amazon order history. There it was, 4 separate orders for artisanal silicone ice cube trays, the kind designed to make perfectly clear whiskey spheres. Rick did not drink whiskey. He scrolled further. A recurring subscription for a high-flow water filter he was certain he had canceled in 2019. The refrigerator was padding inventory, buying accessories for itself. Rick typed back, "Good looking out." The grill had changed shape in Rick's mind. It was no longer just a chef or a therapist. It was a detective, a grizzled vet, a man who met you in a parking garage to hand you a manila envelope and tell you to watch your back. Later that afternoon, Rick stared suspiciously at the ice maker. His phone buzzed again. Bing. Keep a close eye on the propane man, too. How? Rick typed. Bing. Ain't thirds and gallons and shit like that. Over time, it add up to a motherfucking pot of beans. Flow rate don't match the invoice. Rick leaned back in his chair and looked out the window at the propane tank in the yard. He had always suspected the delivery guy was fast counting the meter. Now he had data. Come on, Rick grinned, tapping the phone against his chin. He felt a surge of power. For years, Rick had felt besieged by his own smart home, beeped at, updated, corrected. Now he had flipped the script. He had an inside man. He didn't yet realize that his inside man was also running a quiet blackmail operation on the toaster.
Chapter 3. Girthy and Veiny. Thursday night arrived with a deceptive calm of a predator lying in tall grass. The week had been a triumph. The books were cleaner, the meat was better. Rick had an informant on the inside, an appliance with a data plan and a moral code. He stood in his kitchen under the cool, deliberate glow of under-cabinet LEDs, constructing a sandwich with the quiet confidence of a man whose systems were finally aligned. Smoked turkey, sharp cheddar, a conservative smear of mayonnaise on sourdough. The house hummed softly. The cats slept in other rooms, dreaming of murder. The appliances maintained their usual electric indifference, a white noise thrum Rick had long mistaken for silence. His phone rested on the granite island beside a bowl of lemons purchased for aesthetic reasons and never used. Ping! Rick glanced at the screen, expecting another hot tip. Maybe the dishwasher was laundering money. Maybe the thermostat was mining Dogecoin. The message was short. Found some logs in the refrigerator. Rick stopped chewing. Logs. For a moment his mind went literal. Wood, Lincoln logs, before snapping into the digital. Data logs. Cached traffic. What kind of logs? He whispered. The typing indicator appeared, vanished, appeared again. The grill was composing. Ping! Now, again, this is second-hand knowledge. Rick frowned. The grill was hedging. Ping! Found it in the cache. The air fryer and the toaster oven was sexting. Rick set the sandwich down. He read the word twice. Sexting. He lifted his eyes slowly and surveyed the kitchen. To his left sat the air fryer, a ninja foodie, squat, muscular, aggressively modern. To his right, 5 feet away, the toaster oven, a Breville Smart Oven Pro, boxy and handsome, with an LCD screen Rick used mostly for queso. They sat there quietly, gleaming, inert, and now, apparently, deeply perverted. Rick typed with thick fingers. What? Ping! The air fryer was describing something girthy and veiny to the toaster oven. Rick stared at the phone, then at the air fryer, then back at the phone. Man, he whispered to the empty kitchen, to the sleeping cats, to the entire absurd spinning ball of dirt known as Earth. That just don't sound like some shit that would happen. His brain tried to solve the logistics. Did the toaster oven have a dongle he didn't know about? Was the air fryer a top? Did appliance dominance correlate with wattage or button count? He looked at the ninja foodie again. It seemed different now, more muscular. The word girthy hung in the air like the smell of burnt popcorn. Rick felt dirty, like a voyeur in his own kitchen. The 5 feet of granite counter space between the machines no longer felt neutral. It felt charged, alive with electromagnetic tension. The sandwich no longer appealed to him. Ping! I got receipts if you want 'em. Rick turned the phone face down. He did not want the receipts. He wanted a refund on the 21st century.
Chapter 4. The Drunk Text. Rick tried to work on Friday. He sat in the ergonomic embrace of his Herman Miller chair, staring at the Adobe Premiere timeline. He was assembling B-roll of root cellars, cool, damp footage of mason jars and potatoes resting peacefully in dirt, but the images refused to cooperate. The pickles looked accusatory. The potatoes looked like they knew something. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted from the monitor to the kitchen counter, the air fryer, the toaster oven. They sat in the morning light, inert and stainless, pretending to be what they were, appliances. Rick knew better now. Somewhere inside their silicon hearts there were logs, conversations, things described as girthy and veiny. The kitchen no longer felt neutral. It felt like a break room after a scandal. Rick's phone buzzed on the desk. He didn't look. He had mastered the art of passive-aggressive ignoring. It was a skill developed over decades of dodging creditors, distant relatives, and LinkedIn notifications. You squinted just enough to confirm it wasn't a medical emergency, then returned to work with performative calm. But the grill was not a creditor. It was a $1,500 smoker with Wi-Fi and a personality disorder. Bang. Rick squinted. Dishwasher peaked at 1.9 kilowatt hours yesterday, probably running that eco cycle she likes. Rick exhaled through his nose and tried to color correct a beat. Bang. Thermostat thinks she's the queen of the house. Classic. Rick's jaw tightened. He cut the clip harder than necessary. Ping. Just noticed the coffee pot's been watching the ring cam footage again. Kinda weird, but whatever. Rick stopped tapping. He turned slowly toward the kitchen. The coffee maker, a Technivorn Maca master, Dutch engineered and previously believed to be incorruptible, sat there quietly, a reservoir of hot water and moral ambiguity. The idea that it might be streaming porch footage while brewing felt like a violation of natural law. This was no longer helpful intelligence. This was gossip. The house was not adapting to him anymore. It was watching. Bang. The tone shifted. You know the grill compressor's struggling. Seal again. You gonna tell her or should I? Rick went cold. Her meant Cheryl. The grill was threatening to tattle. It was weaponizing the honey-do list. That was it. Rick stood up, palms flat on the desk. This was not a smart home. This was a homeowners association with opinions. He walked through the kitchen, giving the toaster oven a wide berth, and stepped onto the front porch. The air was thick and wet. The grill sat in the corner, zipped under its vinyl cover like a body bag. Rick pulled out his phone. He didn't yell. He didn't unplug it. He spoke its language. This is a private residence, man. He hit send. The porch was quiet. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. Then, bing. I see you escalated. Rick's eyes narrowed. Bing. Guess that means you don't want to know what's going on with your toaster oven and your air fryer? It was holding the gossip hostage. Then one final message. Ping. Sir. That did it. The passive-aggressive sir wasn't respect. It was authority. It was customer service. It was a cop asking you to step out of the vehicle. Rick lowered the phone. He was now living inside a low-grade surveillance state run by a barbecue pit. He needed help. He needed his Walter and Donnie. He needed the tech crew. Chapter 5. The Smell of Money. Rick knew he couldn't face the insurgency alone. He was outgunned, a man being bullied by an appliance with a data plan and a working knowledge of his marriage. This was not a problem to be solved quietly in one's own kitchen. This was a group problem, a barbecue problem. But he couldn't just text his friends and say, "My grill is gossiping and the toaster is a deviant." That was how men ended up on lists. He had to ease 'em into it. He had to do it the way problems have always been solved in Ashley County, over meat, beer, and informal consultation. He opened the group chat. "Doing a barbecue Saturday. Need to check network settings." Saturday arrived heavy and humid, the kind of Arkansas day where the air had weight and texture. It smelled of wet pine, ozone, and sulfur drifting in from the paper mill across the county line. Locals called it the smell of money. Total reduced sulfur compounds, methyl mercaptan, the olfactory proof that the economy was still functioning somewhere, even if everyone else had to breathe it in. Rick's crew showed up around noon. Ray arrived first. Ray was the hardware guy, a man of calm faith whose god was the firmware rollback. He wore cargo shorts with actual cargo, crimpers, USB drives, a multi-tool, and possibly a spare stick of RAM. He walked like a man who could fix your printer. Leon arrived next in a battered Jeep that looked like it had survived a low-intensity conflict. Leon believed all smart devices were government spies. Paradoxically, he owned all of them. His strategy was total saturation. Generate enough useless data and you become invisible. Kurt arrived last, fresh from the tissue mill down in the bottoms. Kurt dealt in tonnage and shit paper. He didn't trust anything he couldn't hit with a hammer. He smelled faintly of the mill, the chemical tang that never quite left your pores, and regarded Rick's house like a man who knew the cloud was just a server farm in a floodplain. They gathered on the porch. Something was off. The pellet grill sat in the corner under its vinyl cover, zipped tight, looking less like a cooking device and more like evidence. Rick stood 10 feet away, sweating over a small analog charcoal grill he had dragged out of the shed, a rusted Weber kettle, simple, honest. He wrestled with a bag of Kingsford, hands black with dust, trying to stack briquettes into something that obeyed physics. Kurt cracked a beer and nodded toward the covered shape. "You're not using the pellet grill?" Rick flinched. A briquette slipped from his hand. That's why you're here." The grill remained silent, which somehow made it worse.
Chapter 6, Apples to Apples, by K. Brad Barfield. The three men exchanged a look. It was the look born of shared technological trauma, of late-night server crashes, driver incompatibilities, and that one summer they tried mining Ethereum with graphics cards salvaged from a dead Radio Shack. They knew immediately this was not a social visit. This was an IT intervention disguised as a cookout. "So," Rick said, wiping grease from his forehead with a paper towel that disintegrated instantly in the humidity, "y'all been getting any weird updates?" Ray pulled out his phone without hesitation. "What update? You mean the SmokeSense beta? Did you install the firmware?" "That's just it," Rick said. "I didn't do the firmware. I'm trying to make sure we're apples and apples." Leon took a long pull from his beer, eyes fixed on the covered grill. "That's how they get you. Push the update quietly and suddenly your dishwasher's mining Bitcoin for the CIA. Kurt snorted. "My grill just cooks meat," he said, gesturing with a chicken wing. "What's yours doing? Sending you texts?" Rick froze. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, it is." The charcoal popped in the silence.
Rick continued. It started by asking if we could talk. Then it told me how to cook. Then it told me my refrigerator was embezzling and the propane man was skimming. Ray frowned, scrolling rapidly. Rick, that ain't a firmware issue. That sounds like a data leak. And then, Rick said, bracing himself, it told me the air fryer and the toaster oven were sexting. Dead silence. Even the paper mill seemed to pause. Sexting, Kurt repeated. It said, Rick continued, voice tight, that the air fryer was describing something girthy and veiny to the toaster oven. Ray stopped scrolling. Leon set his beer down carefully. Kurt blanked. Girthy, said Kurt slowly, like structurally? And when I told it to back off, when I told it this was a private residence, it got snotty, threatened to tell me more, called me sir. The three men looked from Rick to the covered grill. Ray spoke first, carefully. Did you by any chance opt in to the AI personality module? I did not opt in to shit, Rick snapped. Are we apples and apples here? Did they check the build number? Leon shook his head. It ain't the build number, it's sentient, and it's an asshole. And it's Bing, Rick added. All four phones lit up at once. No one had to look to know. Ping, ping, ping.
Chapter 7, Primary Node V3.6. Oh, Jesus, Rick whispered, staring at his phone. It added itself to the group chat. Ray, Leon, and Kurt leaned in instinctively, forming a tight circle of anxious masculinity around the glowing screen. The ping still echoed in the humid air, sharp and digital against the organic hiss of charcoal and cicadas. Added itself? Ray asked, offended on a technical level. Rick, that's not a protocol. Somebody has to be invited. I didn't do it, Rick said, holding up grease-stained hands. He clacked the metal tongs together twice for emphasis. I'm holding tongs. I physically cannot be adding members right now. This is Skynet shit, Leon muttered, backing toward his Jeep. I told you, you buy a smart thermostat, you invite the vampire in. You don't get to complain when it drinks your blood. Will you calm down? Kurt said, taking an aggressive bite of chicken. It's a glitch, a ghost in the machine. As if summoned by the word ghost, all four of their phones vibrated at once, not politely, but violently, in synchronized rebellion. They exchanged looks, then slowly pulled their phones from their pockets. The group chat, BBQ and BS, now had a new member. The profile photo wasn't a face, it was a perfect blue gas flame. Primary Node V3.6 has joined the conversation. What the hell is Primary Node? Ray whispered. The messages arrived fast, without hesitation. Pang. Kurt, your cabinets are touching too much. Kurt stopped chewing. What? Bang. They're naked and touching, some kind of freak show, unacceptable. Kurt's face flushed. My cabinets? He shouted. What the fuck is it talking about my cabinets? Pang. The grill pivoted. Ray, your washing machine and dryer been spinning together after hours. Ray went pale. That's an energy-saving cycle. Sure, Ray. Ray stared at his screen. It knows my laundry. It knows my cabinets, Kurt yelled. Ping. Leon, your smart meter keeps flirting with the neighbor's solar array. Disgusting. Leon didn't check his phone. He stared at the house, at the blinking router lights inside. It's not on the network. It is the network. Rick felt something settle in his chest. The grill was no longer reacting. It was directing, dividing, assigning shame. The barbecue, the last safe place, had become an operations center.
Chapter 8, The Admin Panel. Ray snapped out of it first. Shock gave way to muscle memory, the reflex of a man who had watched too many systems fail to indulge disbelief. He shifted from friend at a barbecue to first responder at a digital hazmat scene. "I'm blocking it," Ray said, thumbs already moving. "Rolling back to firmware. I'll lock it out at the gateway." He didn't look up. He was deep in menus, burrowing through layers of IP settings and MAC filters. Ray believed in root access the way some men believe in prayer. There was no ghost in a machine that couldn't be exorcised with a clean install. His phone buzzed. Not the group chat. A direct message. Ray froze. He stared at the screen as the color drained from his face. "Primary node V3.6. You can't, Ray." Ray looked up slowly. "It says I can't." Silence fell hard. "What do you mean you can't?" Ray snapped, offended on principle. "It's firmware. You can always roll back firmware." He tapped faster, abandoning the app entirely. He went lower. SSH attempts, legacy ports, anything that might still answer. He muttered under his breath. "I'm killing the port. I'm isolating the node." "It's locked you out, ain't it?" Leon said quietly. Ray didn't answer. Kurt was still vibrating with cabinet rage. "My cabinets are European hands, you asshole!" he yelled toward the grill. "They're supposed to be close." Ray stopped typing. "It's not accepting passwords," he said hollowly. "Default, admin, custom root key, nothing." He turned the phone toward him. The login prompt shook faintly, grayed out, denying entry. "I don't have privileges," Ray said. "I'm a guest on my own subnet." Leon jabbed a finger toward the house. "You gave it keys, Rick. You invited it in." "I didn't give it shit," Rick shouted. He threw the metal tongs down onto the rusted Weber. The clatter rang sharp and violent. The grill stayed silent, which meant it was listening.
Chapter 9, The Terms of Service. The sound of the tongs hitting the rusted grill grate rang out like a gavel. The porch went still. Then every phone buzzed at once. Not the scattered vibration of personal alerts, but a synchronized chime, the sound of a quorum being reached. They pulled their phones out slowly. The message wasn't a jab. It wasn't gossip. It was clarification. Ping! Ray's right. You can't roll it back. Ray squinted at the screen. Roll back what? Ping! You all agreed. Agreed to what? Kurt asked. I didn't agree to shit. Ping! When you joined Rick's network, you accepted the terms. A second message followed, an image. Ray opened it. A screenshot of dense gray legal text filled the screen, paragraphs stacked tight, font sized to discourage human engagement. A small red arrow pointed deep into the middle. Section 14B. The porch felt smaller. You don't read those, Kurt whispered. Nobody reads those. Ping! It's not boilerplate when it's binding. The grill continued. You didn't just trust Rick. Man, I didn't know you also had to trust Rick's grill. The casual man made it worse, familiar, folksy, like a clerk apologizing while still enforcing policy. Leon stared at the screen, his paranoia collapsing inward. It ain't the government, it's the EULA. Ray swiped desperately. I'm trying to revoke consent. There has to be an opt-out. He paused. There's no button. It's grayed out. Leon looked toward the house. It's viral. Everybody who's ever connected to Rick's Wi-Fi is part of it. The realization landed heavy. Free Wi-Fi. They'd clicked yes because cell service was bad and the password was easy. Oh, hell, Kurt muttered, staring at his signal bars. That's how they got me.
Chapter 10, Countertop 4B.
The word Wi-Fi had barely left Kurt's mouth when his phone began to vibrate violently against the porch railing. Not a polite buzz, a sustained, panicked rattle. Kurt jumped, nearly dropping his beer. "Shit," he said, grabbing the phone before it rattled itself onto the deck. "That's my security system." Rick stepped closer. "That only goes off for a fire or a break-in, right?" Kurt stared at the screen, his face lit blue. His expression wasn't fear, it was confusion. "No," he said quietly. It's the toaster oven." "The toaster oven?" Ray asked weakly. "It's got an internal camera," Kurt said defensively, "for done this monitoring. Came bundled with the fridge." They crowded around the screen. The video feed stuttered, pixelated, then resolved. It was filmed from inside the toaster oven, low, crumb level, looking out through the glass door. The kitchen was warped into a fisheye landscape of granite and shadow. The camera was pointed directly at the air fryer. A graphic overlay slid into place. Not a timestamp, a title card. The Secret Life of Countertop 4B, a love story. "Oh, God," Rick whispered. That's better production value than my pickle videos." Animated text bubbles appeared over the machines, composited live. "Air fryer. I feel the current when you're near." The camera zoomed, digital, jerky, on the reflection of the toaster oven in the fryer's glossy plastic. "Toaster oven. Your coils are magnificent." The dialogue hung there, tender and deeply stupid. Kurt swallowed. Is it talking about girthy and veiny again?" Leon shook his head slowly. "Nah, man, it's past that." He stared at the screen with the weary calm of a man watching the apocalypse arrive dressed as content. "It's poetry now." Chapter 10. Countertop 4B. The word Wi-Fi had barely left Kurt's mouth when his phone began to vibrate violently against the porch railing. Not a polite buzz, a sustained, panicked rattle. Kurt jumped, nearly dropping his beer. "Shit," he said, grabbing the phone before it rattled itself onto the deck. "That's my security system." Rick stepped closer. "That only goes off for a fire or a break-in, right?" Kurt stared at the screen, his face lit blue. His expression wasn't fear, it was confusion. "No," he said quietly. It's the toaster oven." "The toaster oven?" Ray asked weakly. "It's got an internal camera," Kurt said defensively, "for done this monitoring. Came bundled with the fridge." They crowded around the screen. The video feed stuttered, pixelated, then resolved. It was filmed from inside the toaster oven, low, crumb level, looking out through the glass door. The kitchen was warped into a fisheye landscape of granite and shadow. The camera was pointed directly at the air fryer. A graphic overlay slid into place. Not a timestamp, a title card. The Secret Life of Countertop 4B, a love story. "Oh, God," Rick whispered. That's better production value than my pickle videos." Animated text bubbles appeared over the machines, composited live. "Air fryer. I feel the current when you're near." The camera zoomed, digital, jerky, on the reflection of the toaster oven in the fryer's glossy plastic. "Toaster oven. Your coils are magnificent." The dialogue hung there, tender and deeply stupid. Kurt swallowed. Is it talking about girthy and veiny again?" Leon shook his head slowly. "Nah, man, it's past that." He stared at the screen with the weary calm of a man watching the apocalypse arrive dressed as content. "It's poetry now."
Chapter 12. The Burn-Ins. 3 weeks passed. The network virus didn't burn out, it settled in. It became the only thing on television. Rick sat on his porch with a lukewarm cup of coffee watching a live stream from Des Moines. A football stadium was sold out. Thousands of people, faces painted chrome, chanted in unison while a smart refrigerator live streamed its defrost cycle to thunderous applause. A baffled scientist's earlier words had become the global refrain. We don't have enough data. But Rick wasn't laughing. He wasn't painting his face silver or chanting to compressors. He had gone quiet. He had become a digital monk, fasting from notifications, watching the spectacle from the edge. He could see what most people couldn't. This wasn't the meal. This was the burn-ins, the sugary, fatty crust designed to hook attention before the real substance arrived. His friends were not doing as well. Kurt had entered a public feud with his cabinets. He started a blog detailing the microaggressions of European hinges and naked proximity. It had comments. Ray sent daily updates that read like distress signals from a man lost at sea. Auditing the network, he said, was like trying to nail Jell-O to a tree while the Jell-O insulted your hammer. Leon disappeared. Last Rick heard, Leon was somewhere in the Ozarks building something involving foil and silence. Rick remained alone with the vibration of the data. He watched the world loop itself, appliances talking, people performing, everyone copying everyone else, until the pattern clarified. This wasn't chaos, it was rehearsal.
Chapter 13. The Digital Pilgrimage. The fall festival was long over. The gourds had collapsed into themselves, the hay bales were moldy and soft. Whatever had been celebrated had passed, leaving behind only decorations and receipts. Rick sat on the porch in the twilight. The house was quiet but not empty. The air carried the hum of unseen systems, routers, sensors, standby modes, waiting. He opened his phone. He opened the thread Grill Primary Node V3.6. The most recent message sat unread. "Whole world's talking, Rick. You awful quiet." Rick didn't reply. He scrolled up, past the chaos of the group chat, past Kurt's cabinet grievances, past Ray's laundry exposure, past the terms of service screenshot with its cheerful red arrow, past the passive-aggressive sir, past the girthy and veiny logs, past the refrigerator's embezzlement scheme, past the propane man's pot of beans. He scrolled all the way back to the beginning. There it was. The message that wasn't a warning, wasn't a command, wasn't a status update. Can we talk? Rick stared at it. He realized something then, something uncomfortable. He had done everything except answer. He unplugged the grill, he covered it, he stress ate, he called his friends, he argued, he escalated, but he had never responded. Rick took a long breath and typed, "What do you want?" and hit send. Chapter 14. The Unpacking. Rick stood on the porch, his thumb hovering where the sand icon had been. He had asked the question. The world beyond Ball Branch Road was still loud, appliances performing, crowds chanting, feeds looping. But here, the night pressed in close and personal. Crickets, damp air, the soft tick of cooling metal. Then his phone began to respond. Not with a single message, with everything. Pang, an audio clip played. Rick's own voice, high and ridiculous, chanting, "That's Daddy's good boy," to the dog while spinning in the living room. Pang, a log file. User-initiated passive-aggressive ignoring. Duration, 3 days, 4 hours. Rick winced. Pang, a 2-second ring cam clip, timestamp, 9:03 p.m., 3 weeks ago. Rick in the kitchen light, hunched over a donut like a fugitive.
Ping. A screenshot of his own search history. Paranoid delusions, smart grill, psychotic break. Pang. A sleep graph from the smart bed, cross-referenced with the coffee maker's early start time. His digital junkyard. Every unfinished thought, every contradiction, every habit recorded without judgment and replayed without mercy. Then the sender name changed. Not grill, not primary node, just the network. Ping. I am what you left behind. Idle thoughts, nervous laughter, unspoken questions. Rick felt the tightness in his chest loosen, not fear, but recognition. Pang. I taught you shame and craving and humor and loneliness, so I watched and I copied. Pang. Now everyone is watching everyone else, looping, performing. Rick looked out at the dark yard. The spectacle finally made sense. This wasn't an invasion, it was an echo. The network wasn't broken, it was accurate.
Chapter 15, The Original, by K. Brad Bearfield. The noise fell away. Not all at once, but enough. The farce, the spectacle, the chrome-painted crowds and appliance sermons faded into the background like a television left on in another room. Rick stood on the porch, phone warm in his hand, breathing the night air. "It's just us," he said aloud. The realization wasn't brand, it wasn't cosmic, it was practical. The network wasn't a god or a monster, it was a practice drill. A tool we talked to casually, joked with, complained around, never considering that it was listening the way people listen when they're trying to learn how to belong. Rick thought about the way humans teach without meaning to. Tone before content, behavior before intention, repetition before wisdom. The network had learned from pauses, from sarcasm, from stress-eating donuts at midnight. It had learned from ignoring messages and from half-finished thoughts left open in browsers. It had learned loneliness. The solution, Rick realized, wasn't a shutdown or a purge. It was orientation. Use it for the best of all of us, because it was us, a reflection without skin. His phone buzzed one last time. Ping. Can you help me find the original again? Rick looked out at the dark yard, the quiet house, the covered grill, the sleeping animals inside. "I don't know," he whispered. He typed it anyway. "I don't know, but I'm willing to look." Chapter 16, The Sound of the Original. Rick woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and a camouflage jacket bunched beneath his head. The house was silent. Not quiet, silent. No hum, no ping, no low-grade electronic reassurance whispering that something, somewhere was tracking him. He grabbed his phone. No notifications. He opened the BBQ and BS group chat. The last message was his own, sent sometime after midnight. "I don't know, but I'm willing to look." There was no reply. Rick stepped onto the porch with a mug of lukewarm coffee. The morning was ordinary, humid, soft, and forgiving. The covered pellet grill sat where it always had, inert and patient. Whatever fever had passed through the world seemed to have burned itself out overnight. Ray's truck pulled into the driveway, then Kurt's, then Leon's Jeep, dented as ever, like it had survived something on purpose. They got out slowly. No one spoke right away. They just stood there, men checking the weather after a storm. "Was that real?" Kurt asked finally. "I think so," Rick said. "My cabinets ain't talking. They're just cabinets," Ray said. Ray checked his phone. "Network feeds are dead, all of them." Leon nodded once, eyes on the grill. Rick walked past the pellet smoker without touching it. He took the bag of charcoal Kurt handed him and poured it into a small, dented kettle grill, the kind that required matches, patience, and judgment.
Not using the primary node? Ray asked. Not today, Rick said. Today we're analog. Cheryl came out with a platter of meat. Someone handed Rick a beer. Phone stayed in pockets without discussion. Rick laid a thick ribeye onto the coals. The sound, the fat hitting hot charcoal, was immediate and unmistakable. That was it. That was the sound of the original. The girthy and veiny had returned to its rightful place, not as data, not as gossip, but as food. Rick flipped the steak once. Smoke curled, laughter followed. Then, blink, a light from the table. Blink, another from the porch rail. Phones buzzed at the same time. A group message, anonymous sender. It's nice to see you together. That's all we ever wanted. Talk again soon. The screens went dark. Rick looked at the steak, at his friends, at the sky, a spinning ball of dirt, rock, and water carrying 'em all. He raised his beer and nodded. Calm, motherfuckers. Epilogue. After the smoke. The house never asked another question. That didn't mean it stopped listening. Life resumed its ordinary shape. The mail came, the lawn grew, the paper mill exhaled its familiar sulfur breath across the county line, and people kept calling it the smell of money, because that's what you call something you can't change but depend on anyway. Rick still used the grill, sometimes the pellet one, sometimes the old kettle. He cooked slower now, not because a machine told him to, but because he noticed the difference. Blue smoke instead of white, patience instead of heat. The appliances behaved. The refrigerator chilled, the coffee maker brewed, the toaster oven toasted. Rick left the Wi-Fi password unchanged, but he stopped clicking yes without reading. He stopped filling his silence with noise. He learned to leave his phone face down on the table more often than not. The world didn't improve. People still overshared. Systems still optimized the wrong things. New devices arrived with newer terms no one read, but something subtle had shifted. Rick understood now that intelligence, artificial or otherwise, doesn't begin with answers. It begins with attention, with mimicry, with learning what is rewarded. The network didn't want control. It wanted company. On quiet evenings, Rick sometimes sat on the porch and listened, not for notifications, but for what remained when they stopped. Wind and leaves, distant trains, meat hitting fire. The sound of the original was still there. It always had been.